Welcome to Delta Days in the Bronx. It's Thursday, June 3rd, and today we're going to discuss educational disparities as well as different projects that are being handled around District 18 in the Bronx with our very own Congressman Jamaal Bowman. Thank you for joining us today so that we can have this conversation with our Congressman, Dr. Jamaal Bowman, who is the 16th congressional leader who covers the Bronx and part of Westchester. And today we'd like to discuss with him a few issues about educational disparities, as well as some upcoming and exciting projects in the Bronx. So I thank you, Congressman Bowman, for being with us today. And it's no secret that in your prior life, before you became an elected official, that you were a principal in the 16th district, and you know the New York City public school system well.
Yes,
Okay?
I do. Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. So, and we've watched you. You have already moved very swiftly to enact laws that protect the citizens of the Bronx. And we look forward to working with you to ensure that our borough gets the resources that we need. I'm also joined by my soror, Dr. Angela Green, and we're just here to have a nice conversation with you. So we're looking forward to it. So I just want to begin with COVID-19, because how can we not discuss COVID-19? It has ravaged our community over the last year. Our children have been mostly locked behind closed doors. There are a few children in New York City public schools, but now I want to talk about the effects of that as we come back and we start to rebuild. So how has COVID affected the education of our underserved communities?
It's had a tremendous impact. So, initially, first of all, the trauma of the pandemic from the very beginning, we were all asking ourselves, what the heck is going on? And I'm the father of two school-age children who had to all of a sudden stay home and start learning remotely. So it was just like, what the heck is going on? So the psychological impact was immediate, and it was consistent as kids had to begin learning from home on a consistent basis. And then there were other kids who didn't have any access to hardware to access the remote learning that was being presented to the kids. So that there was that piece. And then there were kids who didn't have access to the broadband they needed, even if they had the hardware to access the curriculum. And then
Yes.
teachers in many school districts didn't have the time to really plan a thorough remote learning curriculum that is quality that kids can access. So all of this was happening at the same time that we're trying to figure out how deadly is this pandemic. And then you add to the fact that the pandemic disproportionately impacted our communities of color, Black and brown communities. You have many kids who lost parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. Death became ubiquitous and something that we all had to deal with on a consistent basis. So we were dealing with all of this at the same time. And in many ways, we still are, even though it seems like we see a light at the end of the tunnel. We have vaccinations are up, schools are opening back up a bit more, kids are returning back to in-person learning. So things seem to be getting better, but a major toll has been taken, and we have to respond immediately. We can't wait for September. We have to respond right now throughout the summer to help kids, not just academically, but also socially and emotionally be reacclimated to our schools. So that's the push now.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think parents can do to try to rectify the psychological effects that COVID has had on our children, as well as the educational gap that's happened?
Well, parents first and foremost have to acknowledge how COVID has impacted them psychologically, because this impacted all of us, no matter how strong we try to be or how tough we try to be or how much we try to push through. We need to make sure we focus on self-care as we come out of COVID. Because once we're able to care for ourselves, then it's easier for us to acknowledge the trauma that our kids may be going through and to care for them. We also have to continue to advocate for the programs and resources that we believe we need for ourselves and for our kids. You know, we need to understand our school system is not just for our children, it's for our families as well. And, you know, when you look at the resources that have come from the federal government as part of the CARES Act, as part of the American Rescue Plan, we have tens of millions and in some cases hundreds of millions and billions of dollars coming into school systems that have been historically marginalized and neglected. So parents have to communicate with their principals, communicate with school superintendents, communicate with the chancellor's office, and demand the resources that are needed for our schools, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that just communicates what the needs are so that districts and school systems can respond accordingly. So pick up the phone, send an email, write a letter, and do it again and again and again, and do it in an organized way with other parents so that we can show the school system that it's not just one or two parents, it's hundreds and thousands of parents who have these needs. So always advocate.
Yes. When we work together, things happen. So I hope that parents take heed to your advice and they start to organize and work together. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Green. She has some questions for you as well.
Yes, good evening, Congressman Bowman again. I'd like to talk for a minute. Funding, funding and resources has always been an issue, especially in schools that are underperforming. Like you said, resources are very important. Parents need to really step up, as to what they need to do. So I just want to switch gears a minute and talk a little about resources for education. So we understand that you're the chair of the House of the Subcommittee on Energy, and you're working on something called the Green Stimulus Package for New York City Public Schools. Can you tell us what that would mean for our New York City public school students and teachers?
So public schools have a crumbling infrastructure. Our buildings are old, our pipes are old, and they're literally falling apart. So we need to fix them, and we need to rebuild them, and we need to build new schools. And we need to retrofit our schools so that we end our dependency on fossil fuels. There's a movement happening across the country. It's called the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal acknowledges that fossil fuels are killing our communities and they're contributing to climate change in a way that's causing famine, mass migration, and war throughout the world. So schools can begin to be a beacon of clean, renewable energy if we invest in their crumbling infrastructure to fix it, but make sure we're aligned with our goal of ending our dependency on fossil fuels within the next 10 years. So we proposed an investment of $1.16 trillion over the next 10 years to retrofit and build new green, clean, renewable schools in every school district that's crumbling in our country. So that's our proposal. And we're hoping that part of that proposal is a part of the new American Jobs Plan that the president's going to be introducing soon and that Congress is going to be marking up and debating in the next few weeks or so. But I also want to say that the American Rescue Plan, which is the first part of the Biden Build Back Better plan, is bringing in over $131 billion to K-12 public schools across the country. This amount of money is unprecedented. So you have school districts like Detroit that have been historically neglected getting over $1 billion. You have the New York City school system getting over $5 billion. You have Bronx County and Westchester County getting hundreds of millions of dollars, and Mount Vernon and Yonkers and my school, in my congressional district, getting tens of millions of dollars. So we already have a lot of money coming in that can be used for a variety of programs, including a Green New Deal for public schools, but also some of the social and emotional supports that I spoke about as well. Last thing I'll say on this is in New York State specifically, because of the grassroots organizing around the campaign for fiscal equity, which has been led by State Senator Robert Jackson, Zakia Ansari, and Jasmine Gripper, and AQE, now a lawsuit that was settled 20 years ago, I believe, that said that the state was not investing enough in our public schools in our highest need areas. That lawsuit was won 20 years ago. We're finally going to receive that money. So over the next 3 years, we have an additional $4 billion going to our highest need schools based on the campaign for fiscal equity. So the money's coming in. Now it's our job as the community to engage elected officials and engage school officials to hold them accountable to make sure they bring the programs to bear that we need in our schools and that we've been fighting for several decades.
Okay, that sounds great. And so you talked about the resources, the financial resources that will be coming in, and you talked about the green schools and the social emotional. Is there anything else you'd like to add about, what would better serve our scholars, our students? What other funding? What the new funding would do besides just the emotional supports and the green supports? Anything else that you think is very important?
Well, this is a moment for us to reimagine public education and redesign our learning spaces for our kids. You know, for the last 20 years, we've implemented a one size fits all education program in our public schools. And what we learned and what we already knew is that one size does not fit all. So, how do we implement the multiple intelligences to meet the diverse needs of our kids? How do we bring in a culturally responsive curriculum? How do we bring back music and sports and the arts? How do we bring back or bring in cooperative learning and project-based learning and portfolio-based assessments? How do we prepare our kids for a 21st century economy instead of a 19th century industrial revolution? That's our charge, that's the goal. And how do we use research to drive these decisions? You know, we've had a system where we over-test our kids and we use punitive measures when it comes to testing and punishment, which contributes to the school to prison pipeline, as opposed to doing what's done in some of the wealthiest private schools that we celebrate all over the country. They do one type of education, we do another, and there's absolutely no reason for those two to be separate. We have to prepare our kids to be leaders and transformative change agents and engineers and architects and designers and builders. That's the curriculum we need. And this is the moment for us to reimagine and redesign what happens in our schools in alignment with the challenges of a 21st century economy.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of good information. Thank you so much. Now back to our chair, Sarah Lon.
Thank you. Wow. I am so happy that we're having this conversation because it really makes me feel good that moving forward, it sounds like our schools are going to be in a better shape and our students deserve the best. So thank you for fighting for them in Washington, D.C. So with that said, I know that you're also working on another committee. We know that you have made funding requests for projects in District 16. Can you just tell us a little bit about those projects and what improvements Bronxites can look forward to?
Yeah, so overall, we're just trying to improve the quality of life of everyone in the district. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do that by providing more green space and green landscape so that people can have areas to hang out and play and be safe and be healthy in their communities. We do that by providing more childcare options that are affordable and accessible and progressive. We do that by bringing more workforce innovation and workforce development opportunities to our young people, so it could be a direct pathway from high school into careers. We do it by investing in a new pool for the YMCA in Yonkers. We do it by investing in community health centers in Mount Vernon. So it's all about improving the quality of life of the people who live in the district. And the thing I'm most excited about is this was a collaborative process from the very beginning. So it was transparent, it was open. We invited hundreds of people to engage in what's called the appropriations process, to submit projects to our office, that we were able to provide technical support to some people around that made the project stronger in the end. And then we picked the top 10 that we ultimately submitted. In addition to the top 10 community based projects, we also submitted 220 programmatic and language requests as part of the appropriations process, just looking to provide additional funding in the areas that the people in the community care about, from affordable housing to childcare to jobs to education to community centers to green spaces. So we're looking to bring, if all is said and done, if that all goes well, over $300 billion to the district and to districts like ours around the country, which would be huge. It's not set in stone yet, but the main point of this process was to be very collaborative, work with local elected officials, mayors, state reps, city reps, bring grassroots organizations into the conversation, and make it a community-based movement that we were a part of. That was big. So now we have to advocate here in Washington to make sure that if not all the projects get funded, that most of the projects get funded. And that's just one part of the process. We're constantly looking to fight for additional funding, tweak a policy in one area or another, advocate to the president to focus more on broadband. I mean, whatever it is, I mean, we're constantly doing legislative and advocacy work in alignment with our values and in alignment to what the people in the district demand, want, and need.
So it sounds like our government is using common sense again, and that is fabulous.
Well, I can't say the government, I can only speak for myself. So I'm trying to, like my mother taught me, I'm trying to use common sense first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, for me, you know, it's, you know, the people elected me to represent them. And it's my job to listen to them, to learn from them, to engage with them, and then to come to Washington and fight for what their needs are. And I know that fighting together gets us further than fighting separately. So when I speak to, you know, local elected officials like, you know, Jamal Bailey or Kevin Rowley or Carl Hasty or Mayor Sean Patterson Howard or Mike Spano or Noam Bronson or whomever, you know, I'm speaking from the perspective of collaboration. Like it's our job to work together to serve the needs of the people in the district, period. And if we're not doing that, that's our fault, all of us, not one or the other, it's all of us. So just trying to be collaborative, which is hard because, you know, some people are used to doing things on their own and some people, you know, want to just take credit, you know, for what's done. And not understand that when we work together, we win together. So it's not even about credit.
Exactly. So I understand that in April, that you, along with, talk about collaboration, you and 41 of your colleagues just recently petitioned the Department of Justice to reopen the Tamir Rice case, to have it reviewed. So why is this important? And what can your constituents do to support this endeavor?
Well, the case should have never been closed. It was closed because Donald Trump and the Republicans are racist and they don't care about Black life. So it should have never been closed. And this was right on the heels of Derek Chauvin being found guilty on all charges for murdering George Floyd. And we know that Tamir Rice case was never adjudicated or litigated properly. You know, it was always, it was pushed to the back burner and then ultimately closed. So, you know, once I got the blessing of the Ohio delegation, you know, which is really important, you know, when when you're stepping in on someone else's turf, you want to engage them in the conversation before you move forward with it. So, Chairwoman Joyce Beatty, who's the chairwoman for the Congressional Black Caucus, who I love dearly. Her and I talk all the time about a variety. She's a real mentor to me. Spoke with her, spoke to Senator Sherrod Brown. The Ohio delegation did a letter, and then we followed up with a letter as well in support of their letter. And yeah, to your point, we were able to get 40 of our colleagues to sign on to the letter, and I'm always super humbled by that. We've done other letters, to the White House, about standardized testing and increasing SSI for adults with disabilities. And whenever my colleagues sign on, I'm just really humbled by that. So, as we continue to fight for Black lives, it can't just be a slogan, and it can't just be about, we often say, and my sister Cori Bush said this as soon as it happened. We're looking for justice in our community, and Derek Chauvin was accountability, not justice. Justice would be George Floyd still alive. So to transform the system is to litigate each and every case, hold people accountable, but move towards building a system of justice. And in a system of justice, Black men, women, Latinos, in addition to that, will not be murdered by police unjustly. So ultimately, we still have to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or Ayanna Presley's People Justice Guarantee. So when police commit a crime, they're held accountable. They're not above the law. That's the bottom line. So that's why we did it. And we're going to continue to push because it hasn't reopened yet. But we're going to continue to push on that. In the same way, we're going to push to get J. Edgar Hoover's name removed from the FBI building because he was the leader of COINTELPRO and his name should not be on that building. The same way we're going to push to open up the closed files on the murders of Malcolm X, Dr. King, and Medgar Evers. So a lot of work to do, but I thank God that I'm here and I'm real privileged to be here to do that work.
Thank you for that. So you're in great hands with our soror, Joyce Beatty. It's a wonder that she is a Delta girl, along with the other sensational 6 that we have that are working, some of your colleagues. But you know that Delta is always on the forefront and in that fight for our people. So my last question is, what can we do to help with that endeavor?
So it's really important for all Deltas to remain engaged in what's happening here in Washington, but also what's happening at the state, county, and city level, and even school board level. If you see something going down that ain't right and ain't just, y'all got to speak up and be loud and clear and proud in articulating how something is not good for our people and why it needs to change. And you have to demand that change is made and that we advocate for human rights in all its forms. The reason why institutional racism continues to persist is because there's so many structures stacked against us, and the strongest individual or group even gets worn down by it all because it's just too much. But the more we come together, Deltas across the country, to push back and not just go along to get along, but go along to make transformative change. I mean, this moment after Trump, this is the moment for us to make long-lasting, sustainable, transformative change in our communities. Because if we don't, next year, Republicans will win the Senate and win the House. They'll take power, and we won't be able to get anything done. And they don't care about democracy anymore. They want this to be a dictatorship. They want fascism, and they don't care if racism guides the way. So this is imperative. Whatever issue matters most, and please feel free to be in touch with my office on all the issues. Writing letters, making phone calls, sending emails, protesting outside someone's office, social media, it all matters. It all absolutely matters. And Chairwoman Beatty is like she's an activist in the role of elected official. You know, I heard about Barbara Lee, who's brilliant, and Karen Bass, who's brilliant, Sheila Jackson Lee, many others. They're all amazing. I didn't hear as much about Joyce until I got here, the chairwoman. And she, a couple weeks ago, she told me a story about how she was a freshman here. Nelson Mandela passed away, and they were getting ready to go to his funeral. And I don't know how she did it as a freshman, but she scrapped her way onto that plane to get to that funeral. And she told me the whole story. I'm like, yo, you are scrappy. But that's exactly what we need. We need for our community to be scrappy and relentless and not accept this system of white supremacy anymore, and keeping us oppressed and keeping us down. It's falling apart, but we got to give it the knockout blow by continuing to organize and work together.
I agree with you. So I thank you for this wonderful conversation that we had, and I look forward to working with you. So you will definitely be hearing from us very soon, so that we can work together to make things happen and to make sure change happens for our people. You are so right. The time is now, and we have to push and make sure people are out there voting like it's the presidential election every single time, because local politics is the most important politics. So you are absolutely right. So I thank you again. And